Hi, you're listening to Stefan Livera podcast. Today for episode 224, what are some common errors that people make when learning how to self-custody? Should you use multi-signature? Rodolfo Novak of CoinKite joins me on the show to discuss this and more. This show brought to you by Swan. In their effort to spread Bitcoin knowledge and awareness, Swan is giving away a free book, Inventing Bitcoin, rated 4.9 stars by Swan co-founder Jan Pritzker. To get your free ebook or audiobook of Inventing Bitcoin, go to swanbitcoin.com/freebook. All Swan asks is that you pay it forward. Share the book with at least 3 family and friends. And if you join the Swan Force at swanbitcoin.com/enlist, you'll get a special link to the free copy of Inventing Bitcoin that will help you recruit new Bitcoiners. You can share the book with anyone, and if they eventually start stacking with Swan, you'll get credit for that referral. So it's a great deal. Spread Bitcoin knowledge and Swan Bitcoin, the best and safest way to start accumulating Bitcoin. So go to swanbitcoin.com/freebook to get your free copy of Inventing Bitcoin by Jan Pritzker. This show also brought to you by Unchained Capital, building Bitcoin native financial services on a foundation of multi-signature. Their multi-sig vaults are designed for ultra-secure long-term storage and have no setup or storage fees if you build them on your own. If you want the white glove treatment, their team will teach you all about multi-signature, ship you hardware wallets, answer all of your questions, then deposit $1,000 of Bitcoin in your vault through their concierge service. And once your Bitcoin are secured in Multisig, you can buy Bitcoin through their OTC desk for purchases $50,000 or higher into your new vault, which is great for self-directed Bitcoin retirement accounts and for companies moving Bitcoin to Treasury. Their advanced business accounts, OTC desk, and concierge service can also help move your corporate treasury to Bitcoin, where your team controls the private keys. No more counterparty risk for corporate Bitcoin. And finally, friends don't let friends sell Bitcoin, so Unchained Capital offers Bitcoin collateralized loans with unparalleled security via Multisig. Check them out and enter code Livera when ordering a concierge onboarding service to get $50 off. That's $1,450 for 2 new Treasur Model Ts, white glove onboarding, and $1,000 of Bitcoin, all in a new multi-signature vault. Check out their website, unchained-capital.com, for more info. This show also brought to you by Nox, a Bitcoin custodian dedicated to ensuring their insurance protection covers the full value of their customers' assets. For example, suppose a fiduciary wants to hold $250 million of Bitcoin with Nox. Nox will seek to obtain $250 million of insurance, dedicated exclusively to that account and adjustable to volatility. No fractional coverage or narrow scope. Insurance for what it's worth, a tool to transfer risk. If you are a Bitcoin company, investment fund, trust, or family office, check out Nox for your insured custody. noxcustody.com. Here's the interview. Rodolfo, welcome back to the show.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
So Rodolfo, there's been a lot of advancement and development in the recent year or so. We have a lot more advancement around obviously multi-signature also. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I know you have been publicly sort of not anti-multisig, but just more cautious to say that it's more for the advanced users and things like that. So I guess what's your current thinking on that idea, and at what point do you think it becomes, let's say, accessible for let's say the intermediate user?
Right. So I think I finally sort of like have this more clear mantra now, is if you have to ask, you shouldn't use it, right? Because it doesn't mean you can't learn and you can't do it. You totally can, but you're just not ready to use it right now, right? And I think a lot of people get caught up in this purgatory between Coinbase, right, and these ultra paranoid setups that you have to be an expert, right? So then they end up just staying on Coinbase out of fear. So what I'm trying to sort of like get people on to do now is to get the basics right. Actually, that that goes well with that link I just talked about. It actually goes right on this. So I created this quick little sort of very, very basic rundown of what you should do. It's a Bitcoin security dog guide. Okay, so essentially all I'm asking is no matter where you want to go and how far you want to go in the security rabbit hole, okay, get your coins off exchanges, but do that in a safe, secure, and sort of like a very sort of sane way, right? So what I'm saying is, you essentially you set up a cold card hard wallet, you set up a metal backup seed, okay? You make a backup seed in metal, because I hear the horror stories from support, and then you make a couple microSD encrypted backups just so you have easy recoverability, right? So what happens here is, if you have a very basic backup, okay, uh, uh, and you have a basic setup that's on a hardware wallet, like fairly secure, tested, right? Now you can sleep at night, okay? Yeah, you don't have the most sort of like anti-fragile system in the world, but against 99% of all the attack surface, all the stuff out there, okay, you're safe against, right? So now you can go and sort of research multi-sig. You can research services that offer multi-sig. You can research very complex multi-sig setups that like truly remove trust from each of the legs, and you know, you can continue your journey, right? But like, at least you're not stuck.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it is about progressively taking a person up the levels of security. I suppose someone might say, "Well, hold on. What about if they just get to a certain level and they haven't been kind of taught that, hey, you need to keep improving your level of security." And maybe that's where someone like a Michael Flaxman might be coming back and saying, "Well, hold on, aren't you leaving yourself vulnerable there to, let's say, the retirement attack? That, let's say, lots of people just trust one hardware wallet manufacturer, and that manufacturer might have put in some kind of deterministic seed generation that the user is unaware of, that kind of thing." So I suppose that's probably the main counter, is something like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you still just have to improve your security and focus on that.
Yeah. So and I totally get where he's coming from, right? Because that's kind of like where ColdKite came from. Like, I just couldn't trust anything else. I totally get that issue that he has, right? It's fair. Now, I can't speak for the other wallets, but like, we build ColdKite so you don't have to trust us, right? Period. Right? So much so that like, we just recently released this guide on how to prove to yourself, right? Verify it, and duplicate the dice rolls, right? So you're not trusting our silicon, period. Okay, so it truly is the last sort of like boundary of tinfoil there that you can go, in regards to our hardware, right? So the retirement attack is like not possible, right? If you duplicate the math on the dice rolls in a separate device.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So I saw the video, you've got the roles.py. Can you just talk through what would that process look like? Let's say the user wants to do this. Now, let's just note, this is more of an advanced user function. It's not everyone who can do this, but maybe if you could just talk through what it looks like.
Right. Okay. So the idea here is, I'll be very sort of simple in explanation. So the idea here is, right. So on ColdCard, you don't have to use our random number generator to create your seed, right? Even though the math is good, the thing is fine, right? But let's say you really want to be paranoid, you don't want to trust it. So no problem. You can enter your own entropy by throwing dice rolls, right? Now, the criticism of that is, while the cold card could be lying to you, right? It could be saying, hey, I'm taking these dice rolls, I'm creating a seed for you from them, but it's a lie, right? Because you're not really seeing the cold run. Now, how do you get around that to prove that is not happening? So we created this little mini Python script, okay, that you can run on Tails. It's like just a few lines of code, literally, and it's completely verifiable by anyone. And you can use other tools as well that are not this one. But so what you do is you open Tails, right? You have to be really careful if you're going to do this, because you'll be exposing this seed to another device. Okay, so let's say you have Tails running on an air gap machine, right? And you have cold card beside it. So what you do is you throw the dice, you enter on cold card each roll, and at the same time you enter each roll on this tool, right? And these are two separate devices running two separate code bases, right? They're different, and both will arrive at the same seed. So it proves that seed entropy was used, that dice entropy was used to generate that seed, right? It would not be possible for us to know that in advance.
I see. And so how many dice rolls now would be required to make that kind of setup secure? Because like, what if the user just does like, 2 or 3 dice rolls or something? Like, they would have to do enough to make sure it's actually like sufficient entropy there, right?
So this is the interesting game theory on this stuff, okay? So because you're validating that portion of the code base of the code card is actually like true and honest, right? Like practically, you could use like just some rolls, right, to make sure that you added some extra entropy, and that should be enough, right, for the practical mind. If you want to be truly paranoid and do the full entropy, it's 99 dice rolls, which is really like just a few minutes, right? It's not the end of the world, but I don't believe is necessary personally. Because remember, right, even if we know part of the entropy, we would still have to figure out which of this like theoretical table of seeds you have, and then sort of figure out the entropy on top of that, right? And how long that entropy is. Like, it gets pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. And I guess because someone who's using this, they know that this is just a one-time setup. They might well just do the 99 dice rolls to make it,
But what's nice about going through the full entropy process, going through the backup recovery and all that stuff is that if you've gone through the full process, right? Like really, really the full process, you really sleep at night, right? Because there is no part of that was not duplicated, verified, and tested recoverability, right? So there really is nothing like left in your mind in terms of concerns about your hodl. Like, remember, the idea of hodl is pretty hardcore. I mean, like, this is your life savings in a device, right? So it's also a fun process to go through the whole setup. But we have videos, you can sort of like go through step by step. It's not hard, really. It's just a time investment, right? Like, you can put a couple hours and be done with it.
Yeah, so with some of the recent conversation around multi-signature and that recent episode 215 with Michael Flaxman, I'm curious because you had a response thread there. So I guess going back to those ideas, what would you say you agree there, and what points would you say you disagree on?
So it's kind of funny. Like, in theory, I agree with everything Max says, right? Like, I actually talk to him a lot. Um, but the problem is, it's very impractical, right, for most people, even for advanced people, right? Some parts of that setup are like almost on the edge of you have to be a Bitcoin programmer. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's too just deep in the rabbit hole. His second guide is much better, right? The 10 times more security for, I can't remember now the name of the guide, but it's a good guide. And it does like increase your security a lot. I would argue even more than 10 times. Now, again, right, I always go back to this. More complexity means more people will lose money, period. Like, that's just the nature of this stuff, right? Encryption is great when you have the keys. When you don't have the keys, encryption sucks. So, right? So, if you can comfortably follow that guide, by all means, have fun, right? I mean, it's fantastic. Now, some of the things that I hear the horror stories, right, from support tickets, because people do email us in private, mentioning some of the things that they come to. I mean, number one is fucking up backups. That is for multi-sig or non-multi-sig, right? So people need to test recovering the backup before they deposit it, right? So you put a little bit of Bitcoin, right? you delete the seed, you recover the seed from your backup, and then you see that Bitcoin showed up again when you recover the seed, right? And then you try to sign it out. So if you've done the full cycle, you know that your backups work. So backup is important. Now, backup for a multi-sig is a huge problem, right? Because it's exponential. So now you have to have, like say it's a 2 out of 3. You have to have 3 separate backups. And these backups cannot be in the same location. So now you need 3 different locations, right? Now these locations have to be thought through, right? Like they cannot be easily, you cannot have 2 of them be easily accessible, right? It gets tricky. So what are you going to do? Are you going to encrypt those backups? Well, now they're not like paper or metal anymore, right? So you're going to have backups of the backups, and you're going to have backups of the encryption keys. See, like this thing gets tricky. And then let's say you use passphrase, right? You have to have backup of the passphrase somewhere else. So it's amazing how many people get screwed with backups. And that's the backups of the seeds, right? I'm not even talking about backups of the wallet you use. So for single sig, this is not as important. It's still important. Not as much today, but you should definitely do it. Is you have to have a backup of the wallet you use to generate your wallet, right? So it's Spectre, if it's Electrum, have a backup of the version, the last known working version for you, right? Because time will pass, you will pass, and people won't know how to recover their wallet, right? They might not know the derivation paths and all that stuff. So with single sig is a little bit more simple, right? Because you could have just a derivation path and you're good-ish. Now with multi-sig, you have to have a copy of the redeem script, right? Because the redeem script may vary, right? There might be some awkward way the developer decided to write that, and that will matter. With legacy addresses, legacy Bitcoin, you had to have the order correct of the signers for the XPubs when you're creating your redeem script. If I'm not wrong, if I remember right, with at least with Back32 SegWit, you don't have to have the order right in most scripts. So that's a little bit better, but still, have a backup. A USB drive doesn't have to be encrypted. Nothing. Just put a copy of the current software you're using in it. If you're using Coldcard, you can export your wallet skeleton out of Coldcard into the MicroSD, encrypted or not, and that's enough for anybody to recover that in case you're not around and cannot explain. So that's a massive one for multi-sig problems that we hear. It's like, oh, I had a multi-sig on Electrum 5 years ago. I only have 1 backup. I have 2 working wallets, so technically I could sign, but I don't know what script I use, and it gets tricky. And then the derivation path is important because you still need to also find the coins, right? Some wallets don't have standard derivation depths, right? So that could get tricky. You could simply not find the coins, even though you could sign for them.
It's quite scary, right? And I think some of these stories are, in fairness, cases of people using older software and maybe they haven't been following the discussion as much and they're not using the latest stuff and doing the correct kind of backups and things. But I think you're right. The point is try to use standard setups such that you don't lose things. But I guess maybe for some of these people, it's that they don't know what the standard setup is. Would you say that's true or no?
Well, I mean, the reality, the truth of the matter on this is that in Bitcoin, there is no there is no right way and wrong way. There is best way and worst way, right? I mean, you're free to do whatever you want, especially as a dev. You're free to write your software however you want. If the signature is valid to the network, well, that's all the network cares about, right?
True.
So they may choose to do this however they want. And then like different software have different purposes, right? For example, Wasabi will have non-standard derivation paths because it was designed for you to do mixing, right? And then you have like we have standards, but they're more like guidelines, right? They're not like, a lot of these standards are not required standards in order for things to work. So you have to be really careful. It could be that a dev, especially of a closed source wallet, could do things in a way that's non-standard, and nobody would know until they go away, right? And it was not malicious or anything. It's just they thought they were doing it right.
Yeah.
It's tricky, right? So that's why we created that walletsrecovery.org. It's because we just wanted a repository of like derivation paths and ideally some notes about their script.
Yeah. Walletsrecovery.org is a great site. And so I guess maybe talking about standards and standard setups for the typical person who's just using single signature, I guess in terms of backups, that person should have a metal seed backup for their hardware wallet, and then they should ideally also have like you said, the skeleton wallet file, so they can easily recover it into Electrum or Spectre and things like that. And then they also want to think about, if they've got a passphrase, is that also backed up?
So what I have here on that Bitcoin security guide is so keep it simple, and then learn the 10 commandments of self-custody. People can go look that up later. And then so you get your code card, you set it up, right? Like, and you set it up with the guides that we have that explain to you everything and why. Okay, and then you get your seed plate, you mark your 24 words. Now you have a metal backup, right? Then you get the MicroSDs and you make a backup of the code card, because that would also save the wallet details, right? So that would make a life a lot simpler in case you need to recover due to loss or breakage or theft or whatever. And then if you're going to use a passphrase, great. I recommend people choosing words from BIP39 words for their passphrase. So at least if they hit their head on a pole, it's going to be easier for them to remember from a certain subset of words, right?
Right.
And then have another metal backup of that passphrase in a different geographical location. Okay, anything that is a key has to have a backup. And then what you do is you test everything. And then you're going to choose a wallet, right? I recommend Fully Noded, Spectre, Electrum, Blue Wallet, or Wasabi. There's a few other ones. They're still sort of like growing up, but these are sort of fairly solid, right? And then you make a backup of those. And then you make a backup of that. And then like the key here is, after you're all set up, okay, you send a little bit of Bitcoin to the wallet. This counts for multi-sig as well. You send a little bit to the wallet, and then you delete the seed from the hardware wallets. You recover the seed from your backups into the hardware wallets, and then you see that the amount showed up, and then you can sign it. So if you went through that, then you're good to go, right? Like, you're really, truly good to go. Because you don't depend in any part of this in order to have your funds recovered somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, I think that the suggestion there to test your backup before you put in the real money is definitely a good one. I think in practice, a lot of people in the industry just started on, maybe in the early days, they just had like a web wallet or a phone wallet, and then they advanced up to having, say, a Treasur or a Ledger, and then a lot of them now are trying out Coldcard, and then at that point, then maybe they started to learn putting on passphrases or no passphrase, and then potentially once they're feeling comfortable with these things, then the next level could be to use a multi-sig setup, where in the example, if we're using Michael Flaxman's guide, you could have a Coldcard, a Kobo, and then the seed picker, and then I guess what you could do is, because you're using multi-sig, you could sort of say, okay, I'm going to take a few more simplified assumptions here. Like, I'm not going to have a passphrase on that because I'm using multi-sig anyway. And I guess what you could do is have 3 metal seed backups, and you could keep each of those with their respective device. Again, so long as each of them is in like a safe location. Maybe you've got safety deposit boxes, or you have safes in different places. And then for each location, you would obviously keep that wallet backup file as well on like a USB stick with each one. So I guess that would be kind of stepping towards better practice. And then even more advanced would be stuff like passphrases and stuff like that. So I guess that's kind of how I'm thinking of it in terms of progressing through the levels of self-sovereign security.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, right? Because the beauty of this is that the first step is already secure enough for most people, right? And for the kind of money that these people are going to probably put in. And like I think like a good rule of thumb in Bitcoin is like always set up your security as if the amount of Bitcoin you have is worth 10 to 50 times more, right? Because that could happen like in a few months, and and then like you're not like scrambling, right, to do things fast and sort of like you're not in a rush, because like people in a rush fucks up, right? um you really want to sort of put the time and care to get the stuff done right.
Absolutely. So let's chat a little bit about the state of multi-signature wallets. What are your thoughts on the current crop of multi-sig wallets?
I think like I mean it's quite amazing how much things have progressed, right? For all the hate on UX, I think things are going forward like well. Multi-sig is not a simple problem, even though it may look that way. Um, we used to have like some reasonably good multi-sig wallets that are no longer around back then, and then sort of like there was this period where like the only place that you could have a like a reasonably compatible multi-sig wallet with multiple hardware wallets was Electrum. Electrum is not necessarily bad. The problem with Electrum is that is not simple, and it does create room for you to fuck up. So that's why I don't like recommending it for the average person. Now, I think Spectre has done a tremendous job. It's really good. The multisig is easy. This is young software, so there's still bugs here and there, but they're not like money losing bugs. And another plus of Spectre is that is essentially front end for Bitcoin Core, right? So a lot of the Bitcoin stuff is done actually on Bitcoin Core, just via their API. So that's a great thing. So essentially using your own node, and you're having Bitcoin Core, which is fairly well sort of research software doing a lot of the hard stuff. And then there is a Lily wallet. It's really cool as well. It's fairly young, right? It's still sort of you should consider it alpha kind of thing. But it has a lot of promise. It's fantastic UI. The software is beautiful. What else? Blue Wallet just started to launch something that reminds me a bit of the old retired Copay wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Old
so
school.
yeah, so Copay wallet was surprisingly good if you didn't have too many UTXOs. Then it was a disaster. It's good that it was retired. But yeah, so Blue Wallet is doing some interesting UI stuff, because another concern of multisig is coordination, right? A lot of people think like you think you multisig just for yourself, but a lot of times multisig is between you and other people. So having coordination of the multisig assigning ceremony, if you want to call it, is very important. And I think Blue Wallet is really sort of working well on that. Yeah, those are the ones I have played with recently.
Gotcha. Yeah, and there's this interesting one, Nunchuck by Hugo Nguyen. So it'll be interesting to see what comes there.
Oh, I'm totally looking forward to trying it. So another thing that's important is if you're going to use a hardware wallet, like make sure the hardware wallet is PSBT compatible, or at a minimum HWI compatible. Okay, HWI is an Andrew Chow project to connect hardware wallets to Bitcoin Core. Okay, because hardware wallets could go away, they could choose to abandon Bitcoin, right? And then great, you have this electronic device that now you cannot make it talk to your software wallet to build and sign transactions, right? So I mean, it is my opinion that no one should be using a hardware wallet that doesn't support PSBT anymore. It's Bitcoin partially signed transaction file. And because at least with that, you know that's future compatible, right? You know that even if the vendor decides not to support Electrum anymore, Electrum supports PSBT, so you're good to go, right? We really want to remove these crutches out of this project.
Back to the interview in a moment, but first a message for the sponsors of the show. Check out bitcoinblackfriday.com. This is a project from the team behind Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin 2021 conference. It's a celebration of the growing Bitcoin economy. On the site, you can find active deals for up to 50% off on your favorite Bitcoin gear and other merchants that accept Bitcoin. It doesn't stop with spending Bitcoins though. The Fold team has teamed up with Bitcoin Black Friday to bring you a special promo for the much-awaited Bitcoin back card. Spend fiat and earn Bitcoin. Now, if you sign up for early access for the Fold card on Bitcoin Black Friday, you will be entered into a raffle to win a whole Bitcoin. That's right, go to bitcoinblackfriday.com right now and sign up for the Fold Bitcoin rewards card to enter and get a chance to win an entire Bitcoin. And lastly, CipherSafe, producing the Cipher Wheel product. So we're talking about Bitcoin and security this episode, but have you also considered backup and recovering your Bitcoins? Are you keeping your BIP39 seed just on that paper backup? Well, you've got to think about whether it's fireproof and waterproof and rustproof if there were to be an accident or some other event such as that. So look into the Cipher Wheel. It comes in a wheel shape and it masks the words of your seed. And you get some tiles, and for each of your words, you can slide in the tiles to back up your seed. And in this way, you can make sure that you or your loved ones have access to Bitcoins if an accident occurs. Orders are going out. Go to cyphersafe.io and use the code Livera for a discount. Back to the interview. It seems to me like the industry is getting around to that message, and certainly I'm a lot more comfortable using PSBT wallets myself, also just because it's just easier to work with other pieces of software in the ecosystem. So in terms of hardware wallets, are you bullish or bearish on QR codes?
So QRs are really cool, right? I mean, I love QRs per se, right? The problem with QRs is then the bandwidth, right? The data bandwidth on QRs is garbage. It's very tiny, especially with small screens, and the camera resolution. So it's actually, in my opinion, doomed for multi-sig, because you're going to need big screens and you're going to need to do animated QRs to do any multi-sig work, because the PSBT files are going to be large. And as the complexity of these multi-sig setups grow, they could become even bigger, right? So then they won't fit at all on a QR that fits in a reasonably sized screen of a hardware wallet, right? So then you're stuck. And you're not necessarily gaining any more security. Like QRs are not more secure than MicroSDs, right? Unlike people love to believe that, but it's still data, right? Like you're passing around data. I could make the case that a QR is worse than a MicroSD for security, because at least on the MicroSD, the data is visible, right? So you can see the data, and you can verify it. You can even sanitize that, or you can use a computer to pass that information to another MicroSD, or sort of like you can create some incentives for attackers to know that they're be wasting their time, right? With QRs, though, you're sending the data directly to the device, and I've seen some of the implementations around of QR stuff. They're trash. Nobody's really checking or doing real security in the data coming through the QR. And two, actually, there was an attack, if I remember correctly, not Bitcoin related, but it was there were some malware going through QRs, because, or no, actually no, it was Bitcoin. There was some attack, if I remember. It was essentially the because a lot of wallets out there just sort of fork source code. They use the QR generation code that they found on GitHub, and the attacker changed this library to generate known addresses that were his. Uh, so
Ouch.
yeah, exactly, right. So it's tricky, right, because it is not visible. Humans cannot read QR codes, right? So you want to double check that QR because you can't trust it. This is not to FUD it, right? Like the chances of some of the stuff happening, especially in hardware wallets, are much lower, right? But it sort of falls in the same category as microSDs, right? It is air gapped, right? So microSDs and QRs are air gapped. So they do prevent synchronous attacks, right? So remote attacks. Um, you still have to recover what you try to attack. Although with the QR, it's kind of bad because you could send them like addresses that are not yours, right? Um, Now, I still think these things are much better than USB. I mean, like no hardware wallet should be plugged into the USB, like period. Okay, it is not air gapped. It is stupid, especially if the hardware wallet doesn't have a secure element, right? You're opening yourself for being attacked, especially as the price goes up and the reward for the attacker grows. USB is a clusterfuck.
Okay, so a few things I want to talk about there. So with the QR code, I suppose the counter argument might be, well, it may be, it'll be animated GIFs and it will just, even if it with a small screen, it can just still be conveyed. That info can still be conveyed to, between the computer and the hardware wallets using the QR codes.
No, not necessarily. If the transaction is big enough, not even animated would do the job.
I see, yeah. And this would be like, and there's been discussion about this as well for, I think, Multisig, where there's lots of UTXOs that are going into that transaction, making it a big one, and then therefore it's harder and harder to make it fit and things like that.
Yeah. But remember, right, this is exponential problem, right? So the file, it's the redeem script as well, right? It's the whole signature because it's quadratic. So you have to do signature on top of signature on top of signature, right? So the data grows exponentially.
With the QR code, I guess the attack you were talking about, maybe that's sort of analogous to a SQL injection style attack where, there's like a website there and people try to hack it by doing certain codes that might manipulate the database in the background and things like that. And I guess in this case, the attacker might try to change the way the QR code is operating such that you're spending to their address or things like that. And I guess I'd hope it would be down to whether the hardware wallet correctly shows the user, hey, I'm about to sign a transaction for 0.1 Bitcoin to this address at that point, right?
It's more than that. So the attack could be happening on a website, right, where you want to send the Bitcoin to. Which that's more easier to foil, right? Because if the hardware wallet is doing it right, they're also showing you the address, right? The transaction you want to sign, the change output, like they're showing you all the stuff, right, for you to verify before you sign it.
Yeah.
The problem with QRs on the other end, right? So having the QR on a hardware wallet for you to scan from another hardware wallet, for example, or even the code that reads the QR. You could try to make fake addresses show up on the hardware wallet itself, right? So deposit addresses. It's tricky that way. So I think ultimately, like the best sanity check for anyone, it doesn't matter how like advanced or not you are, is before you sign a transaction, always verify the address and either verify the change address or at least make sure that you have a hardware wallet that does that for you. Very important, because there's a lot of like one of the like recently there was a grief attack where you would send the change to a different address, right? It was a trick that they were doing because BIP 143 there's an issue with PSBT and a flaw on how SegWit addresses are signed. So you could essentially reconstruct a PSBT with two signatures and sort of show a fake somebody else's change address, and it would still sort of look valid.
Yeah, scary stuff. But I think again, some of these are kind of more in the the edge case kind of.
They totally are, and that's why I'm saying, right, like you're pretty safe if your device, like, it's sort of like, think of them as like that's why the whole Bitcoin 10 commandments of self-custody, it's like there's just basic things you do, right, and you're like 99.99% safer, right? It's like, just check backups, check stuff before you sign, right? Don't plug the device on a computer. Like, you know, in order for somebody to foil those very basic things, they have to be like nation states, NSA level people, right? Like, and they would probably need to have physical access to your house, right? So you can get to that level with very little effort. Just do the basics.
And so, in terms of hardware wallets over the next couple of years, I guess you're seeing it like it's not like we're all going to become QR code maximalists, but it's more going to be more like maybe people who want to do multi-sig will use some combo of different wallets, and some of them might be QR codes, and some of them might offer SD card, and that's kind of how you see it developing.
Yeah. So, having QR codes and cameras do increase the cost, right? You cannot make a physically secure device that is truly open source, and sell for less than, say, 250 or like $350-$300, right? So, uh, cheaper devices that offer all the things, it gets tricky, right? It's like you're kind of getting what you pay for, uh, and then depends on also on architecture, on how people are doing the like the openness of their wallet, uh, and then like, I don't believe QR codes are super future proof in the same way that I think MicroSDs are. But I think that you should just support both, right? Like, ideally, you have a wallet that does both. And then you want wallets that don't support shitcoins. Um, I think that the touch screen FUD is completely overblown. It's totally like the level that you have to be in if you're doing the touch screen right for you to attack it is too high. So, like, it's totally fine to have touch screens. Um, and then you can have two devices, right? Like, you can have like a device that's like super simple, like Cold Card Mark III, that does essentially, like, it's completely sanitized the things that could be an attack vector, and you can also have some other device that does QRs, right? Like, uh you want to with complexity comes more attack surface, right? So if you're going to have devices that do more things, you have to know that they're coming from people that you trusted before, of security, and you know it's tricky. You don't want to trust anyone, but you can definitely leverage some trust heuristics, right? To be more practical and know what parts are worth verifying.
Yeah, sure. And maybe that we see more of a range of different options too. So there may be some that are kind of more at the low end, and then, as you were saying, that if you wanted to make the kind of device with all the bells and whistles, and that might cost $300 or $350. Well, for someone who's storing millions of dollars, that might be well worthwhile for them to have multiple of those kinds of devices, right?
Well, I mean, there's people who store tens of millions of dollars in paper wallets, right? Um, and I've seen people with millions of dollars in open dimes. I really don't recommend that. There's lots of people who store like fortunes on cold cards, right? Like, it's I think what's important here is as your hodl grows, you need to sort of like do your own research, right? You have to figure out, and you have to try to really remove the points of failure, right? Like the single points of failure from your setup. Um, one thing that I find cool is that have once a year, um, a little sort of like a tradition of double checking your backups, for example, right?
Yeah.
Double check that they're still there, that your electronic backups, not just for Bitcoin, right? For everything, really. Double check that the things are still sort of recoverable. Because backups are not useful if they're not recoverable.
Yeah, of course, of course. You might find that the USB drive has gone bad or something has gone wrong with it, and yeah, certainly you want to be regularly testing those things. Anything you can tease in terms of upcoming cold card stuff?
So we are working on on more devices, right? Like that never ends for us. Um, we took a little Blockclock Mini detour there. That I don't know why we make those products. Um, like I mean, they're super fun, right? Like they sell and all that, but like it's amazing how much like this kind of stuff really like detracts, right? Um, so we do. So our plan is to have like Cold Card Mark III or some revision of it as is, because it is freaking secure, right? Like it's super secure device. So we don't believe it needs too much change. It'll be always fun to sort of make some upgrades here and there. But we believe a device around that price point is important to be around forever. And then we're building a sort of like a Cadillac kind of thing, right? Where you'd have all the fun features. It's a product that's been sort of in the making for a long time, sort of as a side internal project. I hope that who knows, maybe late next year or something, you'd see it. This device would be pretty cool. But
Awesome.
yeah, but but we want to focus on the stuff that people are using of ours and sort of get that maintained and well featured.
Of course. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan as well. And oh yeah, listeners, if you're not aware, make sure you use my code Lavera when you're on CoinKite.com. And also wanted to chat about the Blockclock Mini. So I've ordered mine. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, you haven't got yours yet. Oh man. So so many people who listen to the show probably know the original block clock. Some refer as the OG block clock. It was sort of like an electrical mechanical device to display Bitcoin data, right, and price and used those digits that you find in train stations. It was fun, but it was a bit on the pricey side. So
It was like 10K, wasn't it?
five 5,000.
Oh, 5K,
You
5K.
know, it's like
Only.
it's like handmade, and like we went sort of like, listen, we want to make the ultimate device for Bitcoin 10-year anniversary, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so we've been sort of like as a side project. We were sort of trying to come up with something again novel, right? Because it's easy to make a screen that shows data, right? So we wanted something a little bit more more novel. And we've been playing with e-ink displays. So we've decided to make another data display, another sort of a Bitcoin device that this one sort of uses 7 e-ink displays beside each other, and they can all be used as like sort of single digits to show price big, or you can have like you can have all the block data, the height and the difficulty, and we're going to be adding sort of like more APIs. And this device also has a USB port for you to plug open dimes. And it's really cool because you can check the value, you can initialize them, you can verify them. So if you're using it as like if you have kids and it's like their piggy bank, you can just plug it in to check the balance.
That's very cool. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to getting mine.
yeah. It's pretty. It's a pretty device. That was the idea. It's like a sort of like an artistic piece in a way.
Yeah, so it's got how many digits does it have? I'm just wondering roughly when we'll need to get a new one, or it's planned obsolescence, right? You said 7,
Yes, has 7 digits.
so that's good till what, a mil or just a
Yeah,
10?
next year.
Yeah,
Good
next
to
year.
next
Yeah.
year. Um, just in case this is an actual concern for some people, we actually have to deal with those problems already, right? So, for example, if you use Japan yen, um, we have to show big numbers. So the clock knows how to change it into other forms of number. So we can show meals. We can use there's some scientific notations there. There's some options that solve a lot of those problems.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and also we've got a chat about Bitcoin treasuries, which is a great website. Tell us how you got that idea.
So I started to see like all this updates, right, of companies starting to, you always had GBTC, and those are not necessarily treasuries, but it's non-ignorable sums of Bitcoin, right? I think there are 4 or 6 billion worth of BTC now. Um, and then when MicroStrategy announced their HODL, which is also not unignorable, I was very curious if there was a place for me to keep track of this. Right, I wanted to be able to just go look, and among other indicators that I want to know about those companies. So hey, what do you do when you can't find something? You make it yourself, right?
Yeah, and you're just like our friend Matt Odell. You're a bit of a domain name guy. You love to hoard the domain hodl. You love to hodl domain names.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it's fun. It's fun to have Bitcoin domains. It's also good for memeing, right? Like I get tired of like repeating myself on Twitter, so you can just go like everything is good for Bitcoin.com. Like Bitcoin fixes everything.com.
well, yeah, I think it's very cool, and what we're going to see is a lot more companies joining that list, I'm sure. So, what kind of criteria do you have? Do they need to be public companies, or is there kind of like a certain minimum threshold? Otherwise, you're just going to have companies who are saying, "Oh yeah, we've got like 6 Bitcoins.
Right.
Can you put us on the list?"
Yeah. So this actually happened. So I started with this with only publicly traded companies, right? And I had an explanation of why not tahinis, right? And the the thing about public companies is that the information is public, right? And they're liable for it. So sure, there is some accounting line that public companies do. Hello, Enron. Hello, Enron. But but at least it's a heuristic, right? Like you have something that like I can trust ish, right? At least for a non like a for entertainment purposes website. So so public traded company is great, and it's really cool because you also have access to very easy to their market capitalization, so the percentage of the hodl versus their size of the company. So that part is really fun. So I added the public traded companies that were available that had it, and there's quite a few actually. Um, and quite a few actually in Canada, and I think a couple in Australia. Canada has a very interesting is a polite way of saying how the stock how companies are companies are open in Canada. Most of the time they're reverse takeovers for that. Um, so anyway, so listed them. They're all there. And then there is all the ETF like products, right? I call them ETF like. So Grayscale, CoinShares, i3Q, ETC Group, and some other one there. Those are sort of like they have a claim on BTC on your behalf, right? They don't necessarily even have the BTC on custody. I think some of them. It's called assets under management. Um, but the amounts are very big, and most of those do have also public numbers. So fun to show, right? And then there were other sort of like three companies that had like trustworthy, like they're private companies, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But these are big sort of trusting-ish companies that, or at least they had to do some certified accounting for the shareholders, and they make that public. So I created a little the threshold for a private company is $50 million worth of Bitcoin, and they have to pass the smell test.
Yeah.
Even though one of them is, I think, the Tezos Foundation, right? I mean, like clearly a scam, but a legal scam. And it's funny, right, that they hold a ton of BTC. They have $300 million worth of BTC. And there's Block One. I can't even remember what scam that one was, but they have like almost $2 billion worth of BTC.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right?
And I mean, the cool thing is you show the basis price, what they paid for it, and then what it's worth today. So really, if you send people there, it can really drive some FOMO. Hey.
Yeah. So that was like my first like need was for me to see it, right? To have a place that tracks it. The second purpose was to create FOMO, right? It's a tiny little website on the internet, but hey, it's like competitive people need scoreboards, right? So you want a place for these guys to go and see, hey, I'm not on the scoreboard, or I clearly have too little, right? This is and there's a reason why this it's the reason why the this is sorted by today's total value, right? It's like today's total amount of Bitcoin that these companies have. That's the sorting there. And then to the right of that, it shows the percentage of all Bitcoin that they have. So
Very cool.
MicroStrategy is at a 2 basis point, a respectable 2 basis point there.
Yeah, so they've got 38,250 Bitcoins, and it's 0.182% of all Bitcoins.
That's
Is
right.
that all Bitcoins that will ever exist, or the current?
The total that will ever exist.
Of the 21 million, yeah, or
Yes.
just under. Yeah, right. So listeners, you can go to bitcointreasuries.org if you want to see this one. But yeah, that's a very cool one. So Rodolfo, do you have any predictions on what companies might be next out of the big ones?
So I think like a much more important announcement than MicroStrategy was to the actual like markets was the Square white paper, right? Yep. Because MicroStrategy is cool and all, but he's gonna be considered sort of like a smart lunatic, right? And this is, and most companies don't have cash either, right? So they don't have that kind of treasury percentage anyways. But what Square did though is super important. This is a monster, right? I mean, like Square is like $70 billion company. And that's not to count Twitter, which is sort of sister company too, right? So Square buying even just 1 basis point in Bitcoin, but with the kind of pull that they have, create the framework for other public traded companies to buy Bitcoin is a big deal. That investment white paper that they created is a very big deal. And what I think people may not know is that the way these public companies work is like it's slow, right, for them to sort of do things, especially like regulatory side. The paper does accelerate, but we probably won't see companies, like a large amount of them doing this, like buying Bitcoin on their treasuries up until unless the price goes crazy, right? If Bitcoin price is like $50,000 next week, we're gonna probably see a like like a wave of that coming. But if the price keeps on sort of like kind of inching up, these guys are going to take their time, and we're going to probably see this stuff on like either Q4 this year, like late Q4, or maybe Q2 next year. You'll take them a bit of time to sort of catch up, and then you're going to start seeing them trickling in, and then the FOMO is going to really build.
Yeah, and I think the other important factor is corporate DCA, right? Just regular buying of companies who are buying Bitcoin regularly. So I imagine Square, they're probably not finished with buying Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, and it's very possible that they're not even buying on the market, right? Like maybe they're just buying from their users that are selling too, right? It's a much cheaper way for you to accumulate is to then you're avoiding external fees, right? So you buy on the behalf of the user, but when the users decide to sell, then you take it off their hands, right? It just goes back into this pool. I don't know. I haven't looked enough at how they're doing their treasuries and like how they're managing the BTC of the users either to have an answer here. Uh, but you're gonna see a lot of that. And I think the main difference now than the last bull run is like, last bull run was essentially like, Joe with $100 buying Bitcoin, right? When you have like large companies and publicly traded companies coming into this space, it's one of their purchase is equivalent to all the retail that came in last time at the same time.
Yeah.
Like all of it, right? Like it's like these guys can move what all the Joes did that day, in a single day plus, right? I think Sailor was mentioning that you don't move the market buying less than $70 million or something per day,
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
and that's
So I
nothing
guess,
for these guys.
yeah. And do you see it like, well, okay, I think at some point we're going to see the whole corporate level FOMO. So I wonder, are some of these corporates actually going to be really weak hands relative to some of the more hardened individuals in the space?
I don't know. I don't know. It. I don't think it's a so you depend on their corporate structures, right? Because it's not that simple on this kind of like very complex entities. Uh, most publicly traded companies, the CEO don't have the kind of power that Sailor does or that Jack does inside their companies, right? They can't just do whatever they want. So they might have in place some policies about cutting losses, right? So that might actually dampen uh, some of the some of the, the volatility because you see those just happening, right? Um, so that's one thing. Uh, Depending on the timing, right? Like, I mean, if some of these companies, like, let's say, I don't know, like, let's say another company comes in, buys 5-10% of their treasury in Bitcoin, right? And they necessarily, they're not a Bitcoin believer. They don't care about Bitcoin, right? It's just another asset that looks right, and you buy it, right?
Yep.
Uh, if they are sort of like forced to hold that with like nice appreciation, right? In Bitcoin terms, slow. So just doubling every year, kind of thing, right? They probably wouldn't. They probably wouldn't touch it, right? Especially if it's only 5% of their hodl. Now, if a company like that finds itself in a position where that 10% they have of treasury now goes 100x, and that becomes bigger, right? Then their actual treasuries, the other 90% of the company's balance sheet, it's very likely they would at least liquidate half. Because, like, these guys are not like believers. They're not just like, that's just prudent, right? In their minds.
Right.
Uh,
They'll rebalance it back down.
they'll probably would have some policy to handle that. But I think what's gonna happen is you're gonna see just like there'll be the growing pains, right? Of like public and large entities learning how to deal with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. It's not a simple problem when it's not your personal cash, right? Your personal cash is easy, right? Like it sucks. You feel your gut wrench. Maybe you shit your pants, right? When the Bitcoin price like completely like flattens, right? Like it hits the ground. It's like, after a bull run, right? Like, that's just a personal vomit situation, right? Like, and it's your own personal choice on how to handle that. Now, when it's a large company or whatever that has like responsibility toward their employees and and the creditors and everything else, like they're gonna have to have ways of dealing with that volatility or with that possible, maybe not daily volatility, but like this sort of like long term crash cycles, right? uh, they're going to probably have to figure out how to deal with that. It's not a simple problem.
Yeah, and I mean, it also does depend on how crazy the cycles get and whether this is the final cycle. Now, I think it's unlikely, but I guess that's my recent discussion with Preston reminded me of that as well. What's your view on kind of what's the earliest you could sort of see it happening, and like the latest that you could see that idea of the hitting that knee of the S curve, such
Right.
that the
So
4-year cycles? Yeah.
I so I don't buy the final cycle theory just because I don't think the MMT people are dumb. I think they're very misguided, evil, or whatever, right? But I mean, just think about this, right? Like, it's like it's a very evil, but one of the wonders of the world what they managed to do for the world not to end after 2008, right? I mean, they completely rebalanced, right? Like the purchasing power, like they screwed poor people, but they didn't cause wars, right? uh I completely disagree with how everything was managed, right? And we're gonna pay for all that in long term, and these guys are playing a different time scale. But you can't deny, right, that they managed to keep the world from ending, and that took a lot of skill. So um I think with the amount of cash, the amount of power these guys have, if Bitcoin looks like it's entering a kind of like a final cycle kind of situation, I think they can do a lot to control that. It could be a slow boiling frog situation, right? That's where you end up, where they can just manage it, and instead of just letting it go, so that at least they save their asses on 2-3 election cycles, right? um, and I think most Western countries can save 1 or 2 election cycles, even in a sort of end of the world situation financially. Um, you can always invite another country, go steal their shit, right? Like, I mean, this is not new, right? Like, go drop some bombs, man. It's like, they'll find a way, right? Um, like
Keep you distracted.
these guys are not going down quiet, right? This is what I think maybe people miss. Right? This is not going to be pain free. Um, so, anyways, I and I think uh even though, like, I don't hear chatter anymore between like large older holders about like sort of like selling price, right? So like people used to have, especially back in the days, like, oh, if it reaches X amount, I'm going to probably liquidate 10-20%, whatever it was, right? So that I can sort of mitigate some of the Bitcoin risk, right? Because if you've been in Bitcoin for long enough, you remember when Bitcoin was definitely an experiment that will probably end, and then slowly switching to might end, may not end, it's not likely to end, right?
Yeah.
uh, so people sort of had different risk profiles through this time. So I think a lot of these old coins that were like going to be sold have been already sold at the last cycle, right? That's when you had like individuals dumping $100 million of personal Bitcoin so that they could, buy a lot of Lamborghinis. Um, so I think that phase of Bitcoin, there's always going to be some, but I think that phase of Bitcoin, in terms of like a large amount, is sort of done now, right? Uh, So that's one interesting heuristic. That's an interesting thing because there's going to be a lot less Bitcoin available, right? To buy. Now this Bitcoin might come back as through loans, right? So these guys might be taking Bitcoin backed loans, right? So their coins might actually be coming back into the market rehypothecated, right? And it might show up on the exchanges as liquidity. I don't know. I'd guess some of that will happen. But so anyway, so what I think is gonna, like, it's more likely to happen is we're gonna have a run up. It's gonna be some absurd number, and then if we don't have a new wave of entities, right, for that size now, so like a lot of public companies or just like very large private funds or some sovereigns coming in to pick up some of that, you might have like an awesome an awesome crash. Like, Bitcoin is like, say not even too crazy, right? So like $150,000, it crashes all the way down to 25, right?
Yeah. And then Peter Schiff will come out and say, "Oh, look, Bitcoin is dead, guys."
That's right, right? I think that's a very possible scenario. But again, because it's a very possible scenario, it's already in the models that people are building on how they want to trade it out, right? So it might not happen that way just because. It's impossible to know. It's just interesting to see. As usual, if you're day trading Bitcoin and you're not like a really, really good at that, you're gonna probably lose money. So, just buy Bitcoin and hold on.
That's right. Stack them and hold. So, listeners, make sure you follow Rodolfo on Twitter at NVK and go to coinkite.com. And Rodolfo, anything else you want the listeners to know?
No, I think it's mostly it. Like, just follow me on Twitter and go check out our products like OpenDime and Cold Card and Seed Plate and Blockclock Mini, and there is more coming. I want your sats.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you.
So get the show notes at stefanlivera.com/224. I'll have some of the links there that we discussed today. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the Citadels.